Right, in this class today we are going to see Glorious Revolution, which is also called the Civil War, started in England. England in 1603 Common Era, James I was the king of the Stuart dynasty, and he wanted to get the approval from the parliament for imposing the new taxes. So there were conflicts between the king and the parliament. Parliament want to be supreme in authority, whereas king want to be supreme in authority. That is, king believed in absolute power. The power to rule the people is given by God, so their people should not question the king, and he is not answerable to anyone, even to the parliament too. So, this is a belief the kings believed, and this theory is called a divine right theory. What we call divine right theory. This was followed by the kings in England, whereas the parliament want to decrease the powers of the king. So James I period has completed. Charles I completed. James I after the James I, Charles I started. James I period over. After Charles I started ruling the England, he did not like the parliament control on him. So Charles I completely dissolved the parliament. He removed the parliament and ruled England for 11 years without the parliament. That is called long parliament. Understand? So in 1640 Common Era, Charles I also needed money to wage war on neighboring countries, on neighboring kingdoms. So he needed money to fight with some kingdoms. So again, he reopened the parliament to get a special grants. And by that time, the parliament continued to work from 1640 to 1660. Near about 20 years, parliament continued in working mode. This is to be called a long parliament. This long period of 20 years from 1640 Common Era to 1660 Common Era. There, the long parliament wanted to control the autocratic rule of the king and his ministers. Parliament wanted to punish the ministers, officers, who were supporting the rule of Charles I, and it stopped the working of special courts created by the king. In those days, that Charles I, he appointed some special courts which working on the guidance of the Charles I. So these special courts were giving judgment according to the guidance of the Charles I, who was the king of England. So here the long parliament which commenced from 1640 to 1660 common era, it removed these courts. So here the Charles I took the advantages in the difference of opinions within the parliament. In the parliament, there were some opponents, that is, enemies. Within the parliament, the members of the parliament split into two groups. Okay, they split into two groups. One party, that is, one group in the parliament supporting the king's rule, and another group of people in the parliament supporting the parliament. So there were differences in the parliament, right? That means differences in the members of the parliament. This led to support the king. This situation become an advantage to the king. So the king took this advantage where the parliament members have differences in their opinions, and the king started, Charles I started arresting all his enemies in the parliament, and this led to a civil war between the group of parliamentary support party, which is called parliamentary party, and the king's support party in the parliament, that is the king's party. This civil war continued for 5 years. At last, Charles I was defeated in the in this civil war, and he was executed by the parliament members in 1649 common era. So the autocratic rule of the king ended there. England turned to republic by 1649 common era. My dear students, look at here the figure of the Charles I. So he was executed without shedding a single drop of blood. The king was executed in 1649. The England, which was under the control of king and absolute power, that got freedom from the king's rule and turned to republic. What is meant by republic here? The head of the kingdom is elected one. Earlier, head of the kingdom was not elected one, it was hereditary. The death of the king led to make the son of the king as a king. The son of the king for next period. That was hereditary. And that was ended. A new trend started, that is head. That means the ruler of the kingdom will be elected by parliament members. That is called republic. So England, in which a king's rule was there, where autocracy was there, and where absolute power was given to the king, that transformed to the republic. And this experiment of turning to republican government did not run for long period. It was not successful. It failed in a short period. So in 1688 common era, william from orange william from Orange, called William of Orange, and his wife, her name was Mary. What her name? Mary, who was granddaughter of Charles I, that is Manvaralu. Okay, granddaughter of Charles I, and William, who belongs to Orange. It's a place name. Orange is not fruit here. It's a place name. He belongs to Orange, so he was called here William of Orange. So William of Orange and his wife Mary, okay, her name was Mary. They were invited by the what to call parliament members. Understand? They were invited by the parliament to occupy the throne of England. After the execution of Charles I, their republican was set up, and that republic was failed in a short period. So the parliament invited those two persons, that is William and Mary, to become the king of England. So they were invited by the parliament. Understand? William of Orange and Mary, they were invited by the parliament. So here in this new system, we see that the government ministers were answerable to the parliament. Understand? They were answerable to the parliament. Earlier, ministers were answerable to the king. Okay. And king was not answerable to anyone earlier. But after this incident, that is after the execution of Charles I, king turned to answerable king powers were reduced. Many of the powers of the king were transformed to the parliament. Okay, so king was given very limited powers, and king was answerable to the parliament. Understand? So parliament become supreme in authority. Understand? The members of the parliament elected by the people, right? And that was under the control of the king once upon a time. After the execution of Charles I, this parliament, which was controlled by the king, turned to supreme in authority by making the powers of king limited. So the power of the king was not a divine right theory. It's not a divine right. Now the powers of the king are limited one, and those powers are granted to king by parliament. That means parliament is a supreme in authority. The members of the parliament are supreme in authority, who are elected by the people. It means people are supreme in authority. So this is the beginning for a parliamentary democracy in England. Understand? Where the king had to rule according to the parliament wish. That means whatever the acts enacted by the parliament, according to those acts, the king has to rule, right? So here, the king, who was an absolute person, here turned to constitutional monarchy instead. King turned to constitutional monarchy instead. What do you mean by constitutional monarchy? It means monarchy means what? King. Okay, king has to rule according to the constitution, which is framed by the parliament. Understand? King was not given the power to rule according to his wish and his decisions, right? So earlier the king was absolute king and he followed divine right theory. Now divine right theory was removed. King powers were limited and king turned to constitutional king. That means constitutional monarchy. So without shedding a single drop of blood, all these changes have occurred in England. Understand? As blood is not shedded in transforming the administration and political system in England, this is to be called glorious revolution. As the blood is not shedded, it is called glorious revolution, right? Or bloodless revolution. Generally, when revolutions takes place, we see that the two group of people fight and many people will die there and the blood is shedded there. This is a general thing we look in revolutions. But here in this revolution, there without shedding the blood, the revolution has come. And this revolution transformed the administrative system and political system in which the king was supreme in authority. Now his authority limited, his powers are limited, and he is allowed to rule according to the constitution. Okay, so this is the beginning step for a parliamentary democracy in England. Understand? So here we see this revolution has occurred without shedding the blood. So it is called a bloodless revolution. What we call bloodless revolution. Understand? After this revolution, the control came into the hands of House of Commons. Parliament consisted of House of Lords and House of Commons. House of Commons, which we call today lower house, that is Lok Sabha. Understand? So House of Commons were getting the power from the king after the revolution. So the power to control the king has come into the hands of House of Commons, and this House of Commons represented the middle class people. Representatives were there in the House of Commons. So by this period, only the people with land and property, those people who had property and land, they were given right to vote in elections to the parliament. That means members of the parliament elected by the people. Which people? These people who have property and what to call land. So all the people were not given right to vote here. Understand? Right to what? Right to vote which was there to only limited people who had ownership rights on the land and property. Gradually, this right to vote extended to different sections in the population. At last, by 1928 Common Era, all the adults, all the adults were given right to vote. In this way, in England, parliamentary form of government started slowly, step by stage by stage, adding some changes to the parliamentary system. See, the parliamentary system of government which flourished first in England at that time is different with the parliamentary system of government today. Okay, so gradually the powers and the rules, then the principles of the parliamentary system of government enriched in the course of time. This is about the parliamentary system of government, how it evolved in England. Okay, today we see many of the countries in the world have parliamentary system of democracy, but the parliamentary system of democracy in all the countries is not same. There is some slight differences in its principles. Okay, but basically we find parliamentary system of government. Okay, so parliamentary system of government in India will not match with another country in its principles. Okay, that means this democracy established in different parts of the world according to their needs and their what you call situation. But basically all are democratic, maximum are democratic countries where the parliamentary system is flourishing. Understand? So in this way we see the beginning milestone started in England. So the parliamentary system as it started in England, England parliament is called Parliament of World Countries. Understand? Parliamentary system started in England first. So the parliamentary system of England is called Mother Parliament to all parliaments of the world. It is called Mother Parliament. Okay, right? So in this way, the Glorious Revolution has succeeded, right, in England, which paved the way for democratic system of government or parliamentary system of government. Understand? This is about what you call parliamentary system. The next, we move another revolution which occurred in America. Understand? From 1774 to 1789 Common Era, America also struggled to brought changes. Understand? So here we discussed in the previous class by 1492 Common Era, Columbus discovered American continent. Understand? After the discovery of American continent by Columbus, England and other European countries, they rushed to America and established their colonies on the eastern coast of North America by middle of the 18th century. Understand? So America was colonized by the England and European countries at middle of the 18th century. Which year? Middle of the 18th century. America was colonized, understand, by England and other European countries. So, how many colonies were set by these what you call European countries, especially England? That is 13 colonies. And how many? 13 states. Okay, that what we call 13 colonies. 13 states in America, especially in North America, turned to colonies to the British. It means England, that is British government, had established its colony, its colonial rule in 13 states of America in the eastern coast. Which side? Eastern side. Understand? So there, America also turned to colony for what to call European countries, understand, especially Britain, understand. So most of these people, what to call, who were in England, they came to America. Here we see that most of them were occupied by people who wanted to be free and independent from England, understand. So these 13 states which were colonized by the British, there England people, they settled there. See, in England, when glorious revolution was going on, where the king's domination was there once upon a time in England, we discussed in the beginning of the chapter, Roman Catholic Church was a supreme in authority, right? So the Roman Catholic Church was suppressing the people and not giving freedom to the people. So many of the England people wanted freedom from the Roman Catholic Church. They ran to this America after its discovery and they settled there. Understand? They had moved to America and settled there. Who had moved there? English people only from England. Understand? From England, English people who wanted freedom from the Roman Catholic Church and the domination of the Pope, they settled in America, understand, and started cultivating the lands, running some small workshops and conducting trade. Already in American continent there were local people, and these local people were what you call kicked. That means the local people were removed from the coastal areas of America. Understand? So the coastal region of America, especially eastern coastal region of America, occupied by the English people, and these English people at the time of occupying, they removed the local people. So local people were forced to set back. They were what you call kicked to the interior of the America, who were at the east coast. Understand? In this way, we see that British people, that is England people, Britons, they settled in America. Understand? So what I want to say here today, whatever America says, that is supported by British, that is England, that means Britain, and whatever is Britain says, that is supported by America, because the people of America are from the England. So America and Britain are two brothers, understand, as their people are the descendants of the earlier British people who settled in America. Understand? This is a important point you need to keep in mind. Understand? So, but the people of those states did not vote in the election to the parliament. Understand? So, English parliament, as the British government colonized the 13 states of America, in the people in these 13 states were not given right to vote. British Parliament was given authority to make laws on its colonies also. That means English Parliament laws should be confined for England only. But what are the laws made by English Parliament also applicable to the its colonies in America, where 13 states are colonized by what to call Britain, understand? And the people living in America, these 13 states of America, they were not given right to vote in electing the members to the parliament, understand? That is what to call injustice to the people of America. See, representation was not there to the American people in England Parliament, but England Parliament is making laws to the American people, understand? So this led to what to call a conflict between the British and American people. How it started and how they succeeded, we'll see in the next class, understand?